Hello and welcome back to an episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased. Joining me from the US, from Nevada, Dr. Bill Andrews. Dr. Bill, he is a long time, I would say, veteran in the space of curing aging, genetics. He led discoveries of human telomeres, the enzymes that been called a breakthrough in understanding how we age at the cellular level. And he holds over 50 patents related to genetics and anti-aging innovations. I don't like to steal much from my guests usually, and this is why I usually pass it to them directly. But Dr. Bill, we gotta talk about a topic which maybe for the audience they will see it not much related to technology, but I think it's a very important topic from both scientific perspective and from life perspective. We're going to talk about aging and curing aging, and this is why, again, I like to hear it from you. Tell us a bit more about you, your background, and what you're currently up to, and then we can start the conversation from there. So the floor is yours.
Yeah. Well, first, I've been trying to understand aging my entire life, just so that I could do something about it. Uh, I guess even all through high school, college, graduate school, uh, I've been focused on building an arsenal of tools that thought I needed to know in order to figure out, what aging is and why we age and how we age, and then therefore how not to age. But I've just, I would take course. I got a bachelor's degree in biology, but I also got a bachelor's degree in experimental psychology because I complained to the school. I said, "Hey, biology is not teaching me how to be a scientist," and they said, "Well, do experimental psychology too." So I did. I double majored, and I learned a lot about how to really be a scientist, which most biologists don't have any experience doing. So, like learning things like experimental design, data analysis, construct validity, statistical theory, all these things were tools I developed for myself taking classes that most scientists don't have. So it kind of gave me an edge. And then when I went to graduate school, I essentially got two PhDs, one in molecular genetics and the other one in population genetics. Population genetics is the study of evolution, but not the what and when, more is the why and how. Why did we evolve things and how did we evolve things? Those are the kind of things that I really needed to know because I really wanted to know if aging is so bad, why didn't we ever evolve a way not to age? Okay, well, I know why exactly now. Okay, and but molecular genetics was the study of how to control our own evolution. Where did evolution fail us? How can I correct the problems that evolution caused for us? Because let me just cover that really shortly. Evolution is all about survival of the species, not the individual. Okay, so it's like things that have occurred, we've evolved has been are things that allowed the species to survive rapidly changing environments. And one of those things turns out to be elimination of the longer lived. I don't like using old because life's about living, not getting old. Elimination of the longer lived. So longer lived being anybody that has raised their young is longer lived. Okay. And so once you have raised your young, it's better for the species to get rid of you because there's more diversity created within the species by allowing the offspring to interbreed as opposed to the parents rebreeding. And the more diversity there is within a species, the better chance that at least some of the members of the species will survive the rapidly changing environment. Remember, in order for a species to survive, not all members, not all individuals within the species have to survive, just a few. And that's what evolution is all about, is making certain that there's at least a few that are going to have some kind of diversity that's going to make them survive when other members of the same species will not survive. So that's why we age, and we're smarter than evolution now. And so I'm just trying to make certain that we can fix that problem and undo it. But it's a struggle. It's a lot of work to do that.
Of course, indeed, it's a lot of work. And thank you again for being here with me today. Now, one thing, from the introduction you just mentioned, which sparked, some curiosity. Um, we've been searching for a way to overcome this for a long time, like since, I don't know, thousands of years, right? Now, why we didn't yet, find, because you talk now about evolution, and I know I'm going a little bit philosophical here as well. Um, w- why do we need this bill? Like, why is it like to be without and I like when you said we don't want to get old, we want to live. But is it more about staying as much as possible healthy, or is it about staying here as long as possible, whatever it takes?
I get asked that question a lot, but tell you the truth. There isn't a person in the field of trying to in the longevity field that is not trying to increase our health span. Okay, that's priority. Nobody wants us to live a long time and be in hospital beds with tubes sticking out of us. The priority is to keep us healthy as long as possible so that we can play tennis, dance, have the time of our lives, even when we're 150 years old. It's so yeah. So the priority is the goal here is to make us live healthy as long as possible.
Living healthy as long as possible. Now, I want to go to the root cause. Like, I'm engineer by trade, and one of the things they train us to do when we want to solve a problem is first to understand the problem, understand the root cause of that problem, so it doesn't happen again. So w- I'm curious to know, maybe some people will have like some general known answers that they hear, maybe on the internet sometimes, maybe from fellow doctors in the and the practitioners in the field. But really, what's the cause that we have all these diseases as we, go, I would not use the older, like as we go forward in our lives?
This is what I've been studying my entire life, and I'll tell you that every theory I've ever heard of makes no sense. Okay. So I have had to just start from scratch and figure it all out for myself. And that's what my lifelong career has been all about. But to explain it simply, aging begins with wear and tear. Okay. But it's not just wear and tear. We aren't like old trucks sitting in a field that exposure to sun and wind and rain causes us to suffer from a lot of wear and tear. Humans have the ability to repair our wear and tear. Okay, we have cell division. Okay, whereas trucks don't. When if you think of like an organ or tissue or anything like that, including even the skin, there's cells on the surface that are called the frontline cells, and then there's cells deeper inside the skin that are kind of called the reserve cells, which include our stem cells and our progenitor cells. But when we get damaged, like a sunburn or something like that, or we drink some toxic solution, it kills our liver cells or our kidney cells and things like that. We have other cells that can divide to replace those killed frontline cells. Okay. And so given that, we shouldn't age, okay, because we can constantly repair ourselves. But here's the problem, and this is true for humans, dogs, cats, horses, sheep, pig, and deer, and primates, except for lemurs. But it's not true for rodents, what I'm about to say. And that's that our cells can only divide a limited number of times. And that's not a theory, it's a fact. Okay. Any scientist working on studying human cells in petri dishes in the research, when they buy cells from a vendor, the catalog they look at will say what with the age of the donor and how many times those cells have divided since they were obtained from that donor. And you can calculate from that how many more times the cells you're working with can divide before you can't do any more research with them. And so the more times they have remaining to divide, the more you pay for the cells. So we all know, anybody working on the cells knows that this is a real thing about human cells, and same with dogs, cats, and horses and the other animals I mentioned, that they can only divide a certain number of times. And let that sink in for a second, because that really says we have a limit to our lifespan. Okay, wear and tear, there is kind of like some time frame or synchrony or whatever you want to call it to, or even wear and tear, because some wear and tear is unavoidable. Okay, let's say blood flowing through our veins. Okay, that causes wear and tear of the endothelial cells that line our blood vessels. There's nothing we can do that about that. That's just going to happen. And it turns out that the frontline cells along our blood vessels actually survive about 2.5 years on average. And so that kind of like, and we can speed that up. We can't make it go slower than 2.5 years, because we'd have to stop our blood flow to do it, and that would kill us. Okay, so we do have this time frame, this clock of wear and tear, but when we're young, we have no problems because we can have other cells divide to replace those. But they eventually run out of their cell division. And when I was still in college and I was running anti-aging clubs, we would have discussions on how could a cell know how many times it has divided and how many more times it can divide. And we knew cells don't have brains. So what is going on here? And we came up with this idea that the only explanation is that there has to be something inside of our cells that's like, and this is going to sound silly, ride tickets at an amusement park. Okay. So if you go to an amusement park, your mother gives you a bunch of tickets, and you go on a ride and you lose a ticket. You go on another ride, you lose another ticket. You can always look at the number of tickets you have. You know how many times, how many rides you've gone, how many rides you have left. There had to be something in our cells, because there's no other biochemical mechanism that we could imagine that could count. So it was something had to be eliminated every time our cells divided. Well, it took me I'd say 20 years, maybe 15 years after that to figure out what that is. And we now know it's telomeres, the very tips of our chromosomes. That's where our ride tickets are. Okay. When we are first conceived as a single cell embryo, we have 100 ride tickets at the end of our chromosomes. When our cell divides to become two cells, each of those cells have 99 ride tickets. And then when they divide, their daughter cells have 98. Okay, when we're first conceived or when first born, we're already down to where we only have 50 ride tickets, because so much cell division has occurred between single cell embryo to a newborn baby. We've used up half our tickets already. But then the problems doesn't stop there, because we still have a lot of growing to do, wounds to heal, infections to fight. Lots of cell division still has to occur. And when we run out of our last tickets, that's when we lose our ability to function. We die of old age, and that's a fact. That's We can't do anything about that. And well, not before I started doing my research. That is, our lifespans. And if you had the perfect genetics and the perfect lifestyle, this clock. By the way, it's called the Hayflick Limit. It was discovered by Leonard Hayflick. The Hayflick Limit is the thing that tells us how many times our cells can divide before we run out of ride tickets. That, if we have the perfect genetics and lead the perfect lifestyle, that limits our lifespan to a maximum of 125 years. There's no way to live longer than that. And I'm trying to fix that. And because it took me so long to understand that it was telomeres, that was this clock that was controlling this clock, I went in after I got my PhD, I went into biotech and used my arsenal of all these tools for a whole bunch of diseases. And I mean, if you look at my track record, I'm one of the inventors of human growth hormone, tissue plasminogen activator, a drug that is used in all ambulances to treat heart attacks, erythropoietin, which is it's a drug that makes you have more red blood cells, beta seron, the very first drug for ever multiple sclerosis, osteoinductive factor, the first drug ever for uh, osteoporosis. I've just discovered several cancer drugs. One just got approved by the FDA in the United States called Rytelo, Rytelo. I mean, I've had a very successful career, and the bottom line is I can cure aging, and my track record shows it. Okay. And so, so that's what I'm doing. I am focusing on trying to find ways to make it so that we can add ride tickets back to our cells. And but first, I had to figure out why do we lose them? And the the thing that back in the 1990s when I first learned about telomeres that they shorten, and we can actually measure them and determine how old a person is, and more importantly, how long it'll be before they die of old age, better than any palm reader can. Uh, we we I realized that if every time a human cell divides and the telomeres get shorter, how is it possible that our children are born with longer telomeres than we have when that all requires cell division to do reproduction? And so back in the 1990s, that's what our focus was on, is finding out why don't telomeres shorten? Why don't those cells use up ride tickets when they divide? And what we discovered was this enzyme called telomerase. And it's only found in our reproductive cells. And so every time a reproductive cell divides, the telomeres do get shorter, but then telomerase comes in and relengthens them. It's like a tug of war. Okay. So you got the cell divides, telomeres shorten. People pull on the telomeres to shorten them, imaginary people inside our cells. And then right afterwards, telomerase comes in and relengthens it. So this is back and forth. So it's a tug of war, it's a tie. The problem is that in all of the other cells of our body, we just have the shorteners because the gene, if our reproductive cells produce telomerase, that means all of our cells have the gene for producing this enzyme called telomerase. It's just shut off. And it's shut off. The only reason to shut it off is, as I mentioned before, is a way of eliminating the longer lived so that the offspring can interbreed, okay, to increase diversity within the species. So it turned out any species that figured out a way to eliminate the longer lived had a better chance of surviving rapidly changing environments. And therefore, they had less chance of going extinct. And that's why most species now have an aging process. But so we discovered this enzyme. And so in the last 30 years, all I've been doing has been trying to figure out ways of turning the gene on, okay? Either by mostly by finding supplements or chemicals or molecules or nutraceuticals that when get inside of our cells will go to that gene, the telomerase gene, and actually turn it back on. I mean, every gene in our body, we have 25,000 different genes. The ones, our hair color, eye color, all this kind of stuff is controlled by genes. They're all controlled by dimmer switches. Okay. So, like a dimmer switch, they're called promoters. Okay. So there's a promoter and that's attached to every gene. And it's like a dimmer switch. And, and for some reason, this dimmer switch, for some reason, I know exactly why, because I just mentioned it, but it's turned off. So I'm looking for, and it's turned off by a protein called a repressor binding to that dimmer switch and turning it off. And so I'm looking for nutraceuticals or chemicals or molecules that will get inside of our cells, bind to that repressor and dislodge it and turn that gene on. And so I started Sierra Sciences 25 years ago just to focus on finding ways to do that. We have $1 million robots, dollars in US dollars, that that can screen up to 4,000 different nutraceuticals, chemicals a day, and identify these things. And out of like probably 1 million different things that we have tested so far, we've only found like 50 nutraceuticals that actually do turn on the gene. And it's actually, when I say nutraceuticals, I'm talking only about fractions. So we take a plant extract. There's too many molecules in a plant extract. There's like over 200,000 different types of molecules in a plant extract. When you have that many molecules, some are going to dislodge that repressor and turn the gene on, but then some other molecules are going to inactivate that molecule that turned the gene on. So you have to you have to reduce the number of molecules. So we fractionate the plant extracts into smaller groups called fractions. And maybe at the most, they'll have 10,000 different molecules. And so out of testing like 600,000 nutraceutical fractions, we have found 50 that actually do cause that repressor to be dislodged. Now, as I said, it's a tug of war. So we haven't won the tug of war yet, but we've slowed it down. So we have the people pulling to shorten your telomeres. Now we've added some people to lengthen the telomeres, but we're not winning the tug of war yet, but we are slowing it down, which is a really good thing. We just have to continue our research to find more and more potent telomerase inducers, they're called. But let me just do a plug really here because I got it right here. The 5 top nutraceuticals that we discovered are in this product called Telovital, that's sold by a company called Touchstone Essentials. And it's Telovital, it's USDA, let me see if I get this in the camera, USDA organic. It's the most potent telomerase inducer on the planet right now. But I'm just a research. My company just does research. So we discovered those ingredients and we licensed them to this company, Touchstone Essentials, and they've turned it into a product and marketed it. But it's what I'm hoping is that within 3 years we can have something potent enough to actually win the tug of war. Unfortunately, I've been saying that for 20 years, and it there's a whole subject I'd love to talk about. It's like why why is all this stuff taking so long? Why has cancer not been cured yet? Why has
Yeah.
heart disease not been cured yet? Why has Alzheimer's not been cured yet? And why hasn't aging been cured yet? And I can that's something I'd really like to talk about today if there's time for this.
Before I go into this, just out of curiosity, and ignore if I gonna use some wrong terms here or like I might mess things up. I'm very transparent with my audience. You know, when I'm not the expert, I tell them I'm not the expert. I'm telling you also, Bill. When you talk about finding these chemicals or components that might help, how making sure that this gonna work happens. Like, okay, I know a little bit about how they do drug discoveries and they go to the FDA in the US and they start the trials, probably first on animals and then they have the human trials. And I'm talking about curing things like, I don't know, high high blood pressure, like anything related to blood sugar, and these kinds of things that you can track actually. When it comes to aging, which is sometimes we might need to wait for a long time, how the trials work, how you know that this will work.
Well, for first, you cannot measure aging. You can it's like you can we all know what aging is, okay? We can walk down the street and we can look at people and we can estimate their ages. So we know what aging is, but it's not measurable. There's no quantitation. There are biomarkers of aging, um, like including telomere lengths, but there's also DNA methylation and IgG glycosylation. There's also grip strength. There's all kind of things, but these are all biomarkers of aging. And if you reverse the biomarker, that doesn't mean you reversed aging. It just means you reverse the biomarker. So it's about all about how do you gauge your success? And I say, aging is not measurable, but we do know what aging is. And I call my gauge of success the Betty White test. Okay. I will show pictures of Betty White when she's 25 and 85. And I wish she hadn't passed away because I would have loved to have turned her back into a 25-year-old. But I say that nobody has actually come up with a cure for aging unless they can make somebody pass the Betty White test. And that means going from looking and feeling and behaving like 85 to looking and feeling and behaving 25. And we can't measure that. We can't say, okay, there's no quantitation. All we can say is we can qualitatively quantitate. And so we give those QQ scores for qualitative quantitation. So when we so you can take a bunch of people, you can have an audience of people, then rank these people in order of age. You can't put numbers on it, but you can get them in the right order, and so you can give them a QQ score. This person's QQ score is higher than that person's QQ score, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's the only measurement there is, but we can't use that for clinical studies. So what we have to do instead is we have to treat an aging related disease like Alzheimer's.
Mm.
Okay. So we've already done mouse studies, and we have shown that lengthening telomeres in mice and engineered mice, because as I mentioned before, rodents don't age by the way humans do. They don't age by telomere shortening. But but we have engineered mice that do. And when they got old and started having dementia, like couldn't remember how to go through a maze, we found that lengthening the telomeres actually allowed them to remember how to go through the maze again, which is telling us that dementia is not the loss of memory, it's loss of access to the memory. And so lengthening telomeres restored that access. Okay, so now, so what we would do is and I do have human clinical studies trying to get underway right now. They're just super expensive to try to reverse Alzheimer's. And it's um, the idea is that we would reverse it, and we'd treat people, show that you can measure Alzheimer's. There's lots of different tests for measuring that. We can show that their cognitive skills came back, but lo and behold, they passed the Betty White test too. Okay. And so that's the way to get around the fact that we can't legally, or not legally, but effectively do clinical studies because there's no measurement of aging. But everybody will know when, if let's say we were treating Betty White, would, as 95 or 100 when she passed away, if all of a sudden she walked out on stage and looked and felt and behaved 25 again, everybody in that audience would know that. Okay. And so, but that would be, we would just be able to do that. And then everybody would want to take this treatment. But we would have to start off with testing for an age related disease. And there's a lot of them. Okay. Osteoporosis, including Alzheimer's, uh, even wrinkled skin. Okay. And hair color, all those kind of things can be tests that could be looked at.
Right. I can ask you, because you mentioned you want to talk about like why we didn't cure, for example, Alzheimer, why we didn't cure cancer. But to put some context, which I found a way to relate things. Hopefully, I'm doing it the right way. Um, I spoke on this podcast also with some folks who are in the biotech, and they talk about the biomarkers. Some people they talk about the lifestyle. Some people they talk about genetics. And we have this famous joke. Sometime I saw it somewhere on the internet. I can't remember where they show like someone who crossed hundreds. Maybe he's 105, but he's still smoking, drinking, and he's healthy, jumping, dancing. And I know like this is going in kind of a folklore kind of way of thinking, but this brings the question is what's again I'm going, maybe it's a rabbit hole about why we didn't cure cancer, why we didn't cure a lot of other diseases which we know about. They are with us for a long time. And I gotta give very simple example. Like if you don't do this, like you are in a better situation not to get this disease. Let's say, I don't know, if you're not like under the sun for a long time, like the chances that you would get a skin cancer will decrease, right? If you don't do this, like your chances of not getting X will decrease. Now, but we know that sometimes it happens. Sometimes they say it's genetic. I'm not the expert, but why wouldn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, like if we don't know really, we know what happens, we know what causes cancer, we know like the behavior, we know like the cells goes crazy, like just to make it simple to the audience, and they start to behave in a way which is, they shouldn't behave this way. Here I want to ask you, like building on what I mentioned now, Bill, why we were not able with all these advancements in biotech, in we have now AI also as well. Um, why we still struggling in this?
Well, let me just first say, we've had AI since the 1970s. I was
Right.
taking classes in artificial intelligence in the mid 1970s. Uh, so it's AI has just gotten better as a function of Moore's law. So there's nothing new about AI. But the thing is, and I've written my own AI, and we have AI here at Sierra Sciences. But the first of all, let me make another comment. So some people will have get skin cancers from sun exposure and some won't. Okay. But that's because of our diversity within our species. So we're all different. Okay.
Hmm.
And, but even though we've been doing this biotech and technologies and stuff like that forever and ever, the, it comes back to the, how do you gauge success? Okay. And so let me first say, I am not, my company is not competing with anybody. We are working with everybody. I mean, I want my aging cured, even if I'm not the person that cures it. Okay. I want my cancer cured, even if I'm not the person that cures it. If I ever get cancer, knock on wood. Same with heart disease and inflammation and Alzheimer's and all this kind of stuff. I want the cures, and I'm working with everybody. I collaborate with everybody. You'd find that other people in the field are really surprised that I'm supporting them, sometimes even providing them with funding. Um, but here's the problem. In the academic world, the gauge of success isn't how many diseases they have cured. It's how many publications they got. Okay. Because in order to get funding in academia, you have to get grants, government grants or other kind of grants. And how do you get grants? Well, when grant reviewers are looking at grants, they look at how many publications do you have? And so there's a term called publish or perish. And so academic labs are more focused when they get grant money. What they do is make a list of all the different publications they're going to get out of that grant money so that when they run out of grant money, they can get another grant. So the focus is on how many publications can you get? And 99% of the time, the publications really are meaningless. And they're just, look at what I've done. Look at me too. I've done this experiment, things like that. So that's the problem with academia. In the commercial world, this is one of the reasons why I went into the commercial world instead of staying in academia. It's because I was too shocked at how much emphasis was on just getting publications, regardless of whether things worked or not. And sometimes you would you would all do all this work and conclude that it didn't, something wasn't going the way you wanted. So you said, well, let's at least get a publication out of it. So you publish it anyway, and it's pointless. But okay, so I went into the commercial world instead, thinking I could get out from under that. But then I learned that in the commercial world, it's all about quick return on investments. Okay. So gauge of success in biotech is how fast investors can get quick return on investments. And so, I had no problems when I started this company 25 years ago, raising funding. I raised $33 million. I got 50 plus investors, um, all from speaking at conferences and stuff like that and getting people standing in line wanting to invest. I was really good at it. Uh, but I went from being 100% owner of the company to being 17% of owner of the company, and I lost control. And suddenly, these investors are taking over my strategy meetings, telling my scientists to work on other things to bring quick return on investments for them. And they said, "We'll get back to your curing aging later, but first, let's bring in some money so that the investors don't have to continually put in more money and stuff." So we did that. We got successful, and the investors said, "Well, look at Bill Andrews, me has added value to the company so much so that let's sell the company for a profit." And I was devastated by that. And I've seen this happen with all my friends that started other companies, colleagues that I was working with, collaborating with. Everybody was having this problem because the investors were only interested in making money. And and they didn't want to wait for the big cures because that would take too long. They wanted quick return on investments, and that was their gauge of success. I was lucky. I ended up being able to orchestrate a complete takeover of my company, buy out all the investors, and now I'm 100% owner of my company. But I refuse to go with traditional investing anymore. I would not. If I'm talking to somebody that's interested in investing and they say to me, "Well, how long before I'll get a return on my investment?" I'll say, "Sorry, you don't qualify." I just would not allow that kind of person to be involved. But if they said, "How long will it be before you can cure aging?" That's the kind of investor I want, and they don't exist. I mean, even okay, so the third category is these celebrity billionaires, okay, that have started all these biotech companies, including in like Hevolution, okay, which I'm sure you're familiar with in Saudi Arabia. So they're all focused on notoriety. Okay. It's like and the proof of that is why do you even know about them? It's because they're trying to advertise themselves. They're trying to promote themselves and they're hiring celebrity uh, advisors. The advisors are hiring celebrity scientists. And as a result, none of these celebrity biotech companies are getting anything done. There's nothing accomplished. And so, like, my question always is, what is your track record? Okay. And when you ask one of these famous scientists that are well known that you hear all the time talking on talk shows and things like that, you ask them, okay, what diseases have you cured? Well, I haven't cured any diseases yet. They're just all talk. That's what all of them. But you look at my track record, and I already mentioned all the diseases I have come up with cures for. And this is why I'm going to get something done. But investors don't want to invest in me because I refuse to do quick return on investments. My investment, I it's gonna if I had all the money I needed to cure the aging process, I could have aging cured in 3 years. Okay. But I've been saying that for 20 years. And it's because every single person that I talk to, including I've had every celebrity billionaire sitting in my conference room here. I'm right across the street from the airport. They'll land their 747 jets right across the street and walk across and meet with me. But I just won't accept money from them because they have these outlandish, ridiculous things where I lose control of the research and they suddenly turn me into somebody that's going to just make them quick return on investments. Even though they have more money than they could ever need, they still are, their mind is set on making more money. I think the only way that we are ever going to cure cancer, heart disease, inflammation, and I'm talking about all my colleagues too. I'm not just trying to bring in money for myself. If I came up with a lot of money, I'd make certain all my colleagues got some of that too. Because as I said, I want my own aging cured, even if I'm not the one that cures it. But I think the target has to be these um, very discrete, high net worth individuals, ultra high net worth individuals that just by their definition of being very discreet, you have no, it's really impossible to reach them or anything like that. When I speak at medical conferences, I always say the one and only people in the world that these very discreet, ultra high net worth individuals have to communicate with are their doctors. Okay, because they still get cancer and heart disease, and their loved ones still get cancer and heart disease and Alzheimer's. So they have to see their doctors. And I'd say the doctors are the ones that have to tell these very discreet, ultra high net worth individuals that these diseases are not going to get cured unless they step forward and start supporting the academic research, the commercial research, all the research going on that are trying to cure diseases, but they can't get funding because curing diseases does not provide quick return on investments and does not involve getting scientific publications. And so we got to find a way to get these diseases cured without having those gauges of success interfere. The gauge of success has to be how many diseases have to be cured. We got to get away from people that are focused just on making money. I am not in it for the money. And my colleagues that I really work closely with, They're not in it for the money. They're in it just because they want the world to be happier and healthier and cure all these diseases that make life less lovable. I think living is the greatest thing that ever happened to us. I love living, and I just hate the fact that living can become any less lovable for any of us just because of these dumb things that affect all of us. And most people aren't even aware of how many people are sitting in hospices and nursing homes and assisted living homes that can't take care of themselves anymore. They're depressed, they're unhappy. And the rest of us just keep going on thinking, oh, well, we can work on trying to figure out cures later on. Right now, I want to focus on bringing in more money so I can enjoy life more. But it's just when they finally get around to saying, "Oh well, now I wish somebody would cure my aging. Now I'm ready to invest money into curing aging." It's too late because it takes years to actually come up with a cure for aging. As I said, I think if I had all the money I would need, and I estimate that to be like $130 million, based on extrapolating from all the previous work we've done. If we had $130 million, I could have a uh, drug or a nutraceutical or some kind of therapy that would actually cause us to actually lengthen our telomeres and cure aging. Now, that might not be the only key thing that needs to be done to cure aging, but I can tell you this much. No matter what else we do to try to cure aging, aging will never be cured unless we also solve this telomere shortening problem or the Hayflick problem, Hayflick limit problem.
So still we have long way to solve this mystery, I would say. Just two things from what you mentioned, Bill. Um, I'm still surprised that, yeah, to your point, like, because when you say investment, people they say, "What's the return on investment?" And I don't know why, it's their mindset, even in biotech, that things can move fast. Hopefully, we will have, like, I'm hoping we'll have what we call them the impact investment uh, thesis based, investors who, of course, they look for the return, but they look for the impact because, at the end of the day, it's not always about this. And one thing which I believe in is that many times, which is, I hope people will get it. Sometimes you put a lot of money on a research, and I know this from different fields. And then out of these researches, you come out with some other things that actually not related to what you were doing, but they become like mainstream things. And like we know, like for people who are familiar with tech, like back in the 60s and 70s, company which is Xerox, they used to have this, R&D, and they came out with a lot of things which not related to their core business, which was printers, right? And they invented a lot of things over there. And if someone would ask about the return on investment of a mouse, I'm talking here about the computer mouse, by the way, like I wonder if someone have asked like why you invented this, and probably no one saw at that time what could that be, but it did a revolution in the computing industry. The second thing from what you said, and this is a question, um I'm not familiar, again I'm curious to know from you because you've been doing this for a long time. When we talk about attempts to cure these diseases, wouldn't that also make some of the pharmaceutical companies raise their eyebrows and saying, you're coming after my, main bread and butter area. So probably they would try. I'm just, again, I'm not into conspiracy theories or anything like this, but, you know, where is the defensibility for pharmaceutical companies in this case?
Well, let me address the first thing you brought up first. Yes,
Sure.
this is one of the reasons why I left. I've been working at large pharma companies before. I've been directors in the companies. I've been the CTO, chief technical officer for a company, large biotech company. The problem is, yes, we do all this research and we accidentally come up with a discovery that we didn't expect. And the company and the investors that in the company will say, well, look, we can make money off of that. And they say, stop everything else you're doing and focus on that. Okay. Even though we might be working on a cure for disease, they suddenly think, no, let's work on this. thing to make a lot of money. And I'm going to mention a name, and that's Geron Corporation. Geron Corporation was their name is short for gerontology. They were focused on curing aging, and I went to work with them when they first started working. But it suddenly started becoming obvious that it was also I discovered some things that turned out to be great ways to cure cancer. And they told us one day to stop all work on aging and focus on just the cancer research. Now, I was already National Inventor of the Year for my cancer research in the United States. Okay. And, I'm very interested in cancer, but I think the number one cause of cancer is aging. So I think the way to tackle cancer is to cure aging. But the Geron Corporation told us to all stop working on aging and focus on cancer because of these discoveries that I'd led the research on to make. And I I left. I couldn't tolerate that because I'd seen that happen at previous companies. I'd worked at Burlex Biosciences and Codon Corporation. They seem to be so focused on what what's gonna make us more money. Do this or that, whatever makes us more money, let's do that. And I've always been focused on trying to cure diseases. So when this happened at Geron Corporation, when they told us to stop working on aging and focus on cancer, and I'd already had a very illustrious cancer background, I left. I left Geron. I resigned and I started my company, Sierra Sciences, to focus just on aging. And so that's what I've been doing. But we actually have projects here that are probably the best projects ever for curing cancer and also diagnosing cancer. And as and these are quick return on investment things that people could invest in if they wanted to. But my focus isn't on trying to uh, focus on that. I'm trying to focus on the aging because I believe that aging will cure cancer anyway, or aging will cure cancer anyway. And But yeah, so that's the answer to the first one. Yes, it's too much. The pharma companies are too focused on, and it's not the companies, it's the investors. They're too focused on how can we make the company make money. Okay, so the uh, the second part of your question was what about these large pharma companies that look at us, like companies like mine, as if we succeed, that we'll put them out of business. Yeah, well, that's a big problem. Okay, I mean, I've had Johnson and Johnson here, I've had Merck here. They're all interested in my research, but after talking with them for a while, I start realizing they're not interested in me succeeding. They're interested in getting control of the project and shelving it. Okay. I'm and so I don't I won't work with these companies. It's and a good example is Procter and Gamble when I was promoting a pet product. Okay. um, they they actually said to me, well, we don't see a market for extending lifespan and health span in pets. And so, but they said, but we'll invest in you. And it's like, well, you can't say that and then say you're gonna invest in me and expect me to say, "Sure, I'll take your investment." Because I knew that all they were gonna do was shelve everything we're gonna do, but, I the good thing is I have found people now that do wanna create pet products out of my research, and keep an eye out for something called Telo dash, Telo dash, and then the words DASH, uh, because that's a product that's gonna come out soon that's gonna
Cool.
be extending lifespan and health span in our dogs, cats, and horses, okay?
Wow.
But not our rodents. Our rabbits and our mice and our rats are not gonna benefit from it. But
I care about cats.
cat cats, dogs, horses, sheep, pig, and deer also, and primates, they're all gonna benefit from this product, and it should be launching soon. I'm actually meeting with the, woman who's heading up the company that's gonna do that, uh, uh, the next week. And so, I'm gonna get an update on that. So I'm looking forward to that. But I think the truth is, people spend more on their pets' health than they do on their own health.
Yeah,
So
true.
so Procter& and Gamble telling me that, there's there's no market in it. that was complete nonsense. Okay. And but yeah, I think this is going to be a great product, and I look forward to and so this company that is going to be launching this product, they're looking for investors too. So if anybody is interested, get in contact with me, and I'll put them in contact with them. Um, but and that's a case of quick return on investment. That's you know so whatever. Um, but yeah, it is the big pharma companies. It's like, okay, here's a really good example, and that's the COVID vaccines. Okay.
Mhm,
I mean, okay, so I've invented several vaccines. And when I listed all my discoveries, I forgot about mentioning several vaccines that I've developed for curing pneumonia and dysentery and things like that. um, so I do know a lot about how the vaccines work, but the vaccines, the DNA and RNA vaccines that were made, there's a terrible flaw with these that nobody else, you never hear this one from anybody else. Okay, but I'm going to tell you, when you get treated with a vaccine, what you're doing is you're injecting a protein or molecule called an antigen.
mhm,
And that antigen gets inside your blood and induces an immune response. Okay. And so you build antibodies against that antigen. Well, in order to do that, the antigen has to be in the serum of the blood, not inside the cells of the blood. Okay. Because if the protein is inside the cell wall shields those proteins from the immune system. So the RNA and DNA vaccines, what they do is they all are like viruses that go inside the cells and then produce the antigen inside the cell, which makes no sense because how's the immune system going to mount an immune reaction against a protein that's built inside the cell? But the only way it can is if some of these cells break open and release the contents into the serum, which is a very inefficient way to induce an immune response. And people keep wondering, why are so many people vaccinated for COVID vaccines but still get COVID? Okay. And that's why. It's because the immune system is very inefficient. Plus, there's a whole bunch of other side effects from the delivery systems for putting uh, RNA or DNA inside of cells that's causing all these long COVID problems too. But there's been companies that have come up with traditional vaccines for producing to delivering the antigen to the serum, and they could never get a foothold in the market because those big four companies, Moderna, Pfizer, I forget the other ones' names, I forget who the other ones were, but they all block those companies from being successful because they wanted their vaccines to continue to make them money. Okay, so their COVID vaccines, they're cheap to make, they were quick to make. It was an opportunity for big pharma to make a lot of money by coming up with these really fast vaccines that by their nature of being fast, they're also very inefficient. And you hear complaints all the time, but you've never heard the complaint I just gave. And I don't know because mine's based totally on science, the science of the logic of the vaccines. Besides the long COVID problems, there's also the logic of the actual inducing an immune response. It makes no sense at all. There was also a study that came out that showed that the spike protein contains a domain in it that actually inhibits the immune system of creating antibodies against it. And it inhibits something called the non-homologous end-joining enzyme, called NHEJ for short. And the non-homologous end-joining enzyme is an enzyme that actually shuffles the V, D, and J regions in our chromosomes that create the part of the antibody that recognizes the antigen by shuffling different things. It inhibits that enzyme. Okay, so other companies have come up with ways of destroying that inhibitory domain in the spike protein, and therefore let's immunize people with a spike protein that doesn't have that domain. But they too couldn't get a foothold in the market because the big companies that already have vaccines blocked them, did everything they could to prevent them from being successful so that they could continue making money. This is so you're right. This problem of big pharma is a big problem. And my solution is if I'm saying to myself that when I have a cure for aging, I don't need to have marketing. I don't need to have made money. I just need to have somebody. I wish Betty White was still alive. I just need to have somebody like Betty White walk on stage and look 25 again, and people be knocking on my door trying to get this treatment without any marketing at all. And so, setting up on some island in the middle of the Pacific, just make certain there's a runway and people will be landing their airplanes just to come and get treatments. It's and plus I'm not in it for the money. When I come up with a cure for aging, I really just want to drop it from airplanes. Okay. Get provided to everybody. Okay. And shoot, that's like throwing money away, but I'll make a living off of speaking tours. That's the way I look at it. I'm not in it for the trying to make money. And investors hate that when I say that because why would they invest in somebody that's not interested in making money? Well, I think the number one return on investment is the humanitarian return on investment, not the financial return on investment. So I'm looking for funding sources that are more interested in the humanitarian return on investment more than the uh, financial return on investment. And those people, they don't know because they're sitting on their million-acre properties somewhere in the world, their islands and things like that, completely isolated from everybody else, having other people do all their work for them and things like that, which I'm jealous of. I think that'd be fantastic. But so I'm not complaining about them, but they think that everything is under control. They think that people are working on curing these diseases, and they think the reason why the diseases aren't being cured is because of the science is too hard. But I know people that have cures for pancreatic cancer. I know people that have cures for Alzheimer's, people that have cure for strokes. I'm a scientific advisor, volunteer. I'm a volunteer scientific advisor for several companies that have really great cures. They cannot get funding, not even grant funding because they don't have publications, but they have the cures. And it's just so frustrating. That's why we need a call to action. We need to find a way to get to these very discreet, ultra high net worth individuals and let them know that their loved ones and themselves, they're going to die from Alzheimer's and cancer and heart disease because they aren't coming forward to help in developing the cures. And if and we're not when they have some of these people have $1 trillion, when they have $1 trillion and they have to spend like $200 million on getting a cure, that's not going to affect them one bit financially. Okay. They just don't know it. Okay. And that's what we have to find a way to let them know this because that's the only way the world needs to know. That's the only way that diseases, cancer, heart disease, everything else is going to get cured. And period.
Maybe they are acting selfish, I'm not sure, because they want it only for themselves, and this is why maybe I, I I I don't know, right? So, but I've heard it somewhere, I read it somewhere, especially these people who are into this biohacking and age reversal kind of stuff. Um, they talk like how these super billionaires they have their secret labs, and they and yeah, I wonder why they don't want to share it. Like, like, okay, I understand you want to stay healthy as long as possible, but why not with other people? And I think your point is very valid. Like, I think everyone will benefit if I think about it from I gotta put. I'm not. I come from a engineering background, but I gotta put an economist hat on me. If people are healthy, actually, this is also good for the economy, and it's good for everyone because they're gonna go out more, they're gonna travel more, they're gonna spend more time with their loved ones more. So everything will be booming because and this is also sometimes I see in some economies where they talk about the aging problem, and we have like more old people than young people, and the government's gonna pay because they need care. And I think it's and I think now about it from this perspective you just described, I think it's beneficial for everyone. Like I wouldn't understand why someone wouldn't invest in it.
Well, no, that's I have had these billionaires, okay, here. These ones that have started their own secret companies to start doing things because I'm well known. Okay. I'm keynote speakers at conferences all over the world. I've been in Dubai a few times speaking at conferences there. They know about me, but they come to me and even the billionaires, they say, well, how long will it be before I get a return on my investment? And it's like complete nonsense. They are so focused. But then there's a few of them. I've been talking to these billionaires for 20 years or more. There's a few of them that have come forward and said, okay, I'm ready to start doing something because now I've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so I need to get this disease cured, fixed. But then they die right away, and I've seen so many of these super wealthy people that could afford to have invested in a cure for their disease. They die before they actually get a chance to do it. And I mean, I don't want to mention names, but you can, I, you know, there's fewer billionaires that haven't been here than that have been here. Okay. So if you think of it like a billionaire that's passed away from a disease that could have been cured, like cancer or something like that, believe me, they were here talking with me, okay? They came too late, and that's why we gotta let people know it takes a while to cure diseases, and plus, even when you do come up with a disease, everybody's afraid to be the first to try it,
Yeah.
the cure. They want somebody else to be treat first, and then so, you know, we'll do things like treat people, but then before that study gets done, the person dies. It's such a ridiculous the system is broken, and I seem to be the only one that seems to be aware of it, and I'm trying to just really educate the world that we have to change if we want to, um, cure diseases. And I've tried everything. I've tried go-to-market partners. I do have a lot of go-to-market partners, like I showed one, this Televital company. It's this Televital being sold by Touchtone Essentials. That actually provides a royalty that I use to fund my research, okay? And there's other companies too, a company called One Truth 818, and another company called Defy Time. There's several companies that actually sell products that I discovered the ingredients of. I don't get into the marketing, but because I license the discoveries to them, they pay me a royalty, which funds our research. That's how I get my research done here, as opposed to fund investors. I don't want to bring in investors and lose control. So I get my funding from go-to-market partners that don't exert any control over our research. But it's like that doesn't even work because it doesn't bring in enough funding to do the research. My research costs $2 million a month to do, and the only way to really get that kind of funding is to uh, find some like very discreet, ultra high net worth individual that believes that I can cure diseases, and my track record shows I can, and needs me to cure diseases because they have loved ones or themselves are worried about aging, cancer, heart disease, things like that. It's crazy. I don't know how to make it work, but that's what we got to do is we got to make it work somehow.
Right. I think you mentioned few moments ago, like about the marketing. I think we don't want marketing. We want awareness. To your point, and awareness is, yeah, like hopefully I would be able to contribute even like on the nano scale of the whole world, probably by trying to spread the message that you shared today. And I see uh, the attempt you're trying to do, which is a very noble attempt, right, to make people, yeah, as you mentioned at the beginning, like stay healthy as long as possible, which is for the benefit. And I'm repeating myself here. It's not only on the personal level. I think like the society will benefit, the governments will benefit. So hopefully we'll be able to get this message out. Um, Bill, I- I'm very transparent with my audience. Is there anything that I should have asked you, or anything that was on your mind you wanted to share and I didn't do so far today?
Yeah, well, it would take us 100 hours to discuss everything I can talk about in terms of human health and aging and stuff like that. But people can go to my website, okay? And so I speak at medical conferences all over the world, and I kind of do different subjects because I can't talk about everything in 1 hour, let's say. But I have all these different videos where people can hear me talk about what aging is, why we age, how we age, and how not to age in ways that you'll never hear from anybody else because all the theories don't make sense. But I have come up with, using my arsenal of tools and my education, I have come up with, and a lot of deep thinking, I have come up with ways of explaining it all without resorting to theories. Okay. Total facts. Okay. They can listen to these things by going to my website, which is www.sierrasci, that's SIERRASCI.com. They'll find a button on my website called Key Videos and Documentaries. Besides the videos of me speaking at conferences, I've also been in a lot of documentaries. Uh, Most notably, the documentary called The Immortalist, um, and which I'm the star of. So it's like a good way to get some kind of knowledge of who I am and things like that. But they can go to, but people can also email me. Okay, I enjoy taking a break from the lab bench, coming into my office here, sitting down, reading emails and answering questions because I know the answers and it's really easy for me to answer them in a way that nobody else can. And I, so people can email me. My email address is B as in boy, Andrews. So BANDREWS at SIERRASCI.com. I also want to make a point of saying I do have a podcast. Because of my arsenal of tools, I become very good at something that I call critical meta analysis of peer reviewed studies, which means, when somebody comes out and starts making a claim that this cures that disease or that cures that disease, I'm the person that can go and read all the papers and I can do meta analysis, which means I make a stack of papers that say one thing and a stack of papers that say the opposite thing. And I can just count the number of papers. And this is what a lot of people do is they do meta analysis. They say, well, this particular conclusion has more papers than this one. So we're going with the one that has more papers. Well, that's not good enough for me. I do critical meta analysis, which means because of my arsenal tools, I would look at the experimental design, the data analysis, the construct validity, statistical theory, on and on and on, a whole bunch of different things that's in my arsenal. And some of my videos will explain all the tools in my arsenal. But I will I will find out that after I get done evaluating all these papers, there's only one pile because there's only one right answer. Okay. So half the papers are fraudulent. They're people that just got so fed up with their research, they just got tired, they just wanted to get a publication so they could get they can grants because of the publish or perish phenomena. So they published even though they didn't even believe in their own results. But I will come up with critical meta-analysis, and I have my own podcast on that. So when I say critical meta-analysis is I'm taking the analysis up a notch. Okay. And so my podcast is called Up One. Okay. And so if you do a Google search, and Touchstone Essentials is the host for this podcast series. And we're just getting ready to start season 2 of the podcast series. And we're going to be looking at things like, does rapamycin really cure aging? Does exosomes cure aging? Does stem cells cure aging? All these kind of things. Um, and believe me, you're going to hear an analysis like you haven't heard anywhere else because of my critical meta-analysis. But they can go to Touchstone Essentials. They can search for Up One. But my co-host is Sawyer Stone, a woman named Sawyer Stone, Sawyer. Stone is spelled like stone. And so look for my name, Sawyer Stone, and Up One podcast, and you can find these podcast series. Because I can also send you a link if you want to post it on the thing. Uh,
I will take care of that.
yeah, and it's just but I'll tell you, my motivation is I want the world to be happier and healthier, period. Okay. And I'm not trying to recruit people. I'm not trying to get money from people except to do my research. That's the only money I want to get. I want to get this research done and I want to provide it to the my colleagues that some people ask, why aren't they competitors of mine? Well, they're not competitors because I want them to cure my agent in case I don't succeed. It's so bottom line is, and I don't know. I'm going to recommend maybe afterwards some colleagues of mine that I think you should interview. Okay,
Absolutely, with pleasure.
yeah, like well, especially BioViva. BioViva is a great company run by Liz Parrish. I mean, she's very like-minded with me, and she's in Seattle, Washington, and it's something like you should get her on your show because I think you'd find her saying a lot of the same things I'm saying.
That would be my honor, of course. Um, well, like really one of the moments where I feel like I did a mission is when I have esteemed people like yourself who comes on the show, share their big passion and vision and what they are trying to do to get the world into a better place than it is today. And of course, which is people live happily without diseases and being healthy with their loved ones, their families, their friends. And most importantly, it's like also taking care, love themselves, right? So this is for the sake of someone loves their body, they love, to be healthy. And I think what you're doing is really fantastic. And I really appreciate, first you came up very early. It was 5 a.m. for you for recording this podcast episode with me. So I really appreciate this. Second thing for the links, all the links, your website, your email, the podcast, every single link. So people they don't have to go and search around. I will make sure they will find them in the show notes. So I'll make the life easy for people and reach out to Bill. You know, I'm pretty sure like and I also suggest other hosts, other podcast hosts, whatever you try to cover, this is an important topic. Like this is a chronicle topic, I would call it. Like we should be all together trying to address. So thank you again, Bill, for being here with me today. I really appreciate the time, and I'm happy. I'm glad. We made it today, and we recorded this episode. And I promise, maybe in a couple of months we might do part two also as well to talk about the thing that you just mentioned. So happily I would do this. I did with other guests. And
Listen,
this is how, yeah,
help me make it all happen. Okay, that's all I
for
ask.
sure.
Okay, let's circulate this out. Let's get this to the world,
Absolutely.
and let's make it all happen.
Absolutely. And by the way, I was mentioning like it's not the first time I would be hosting someone for second and even sometime third. And very soon the people will see an episode with someone the fourth time their appearance on the show. Happily, I do it. Like I'm not after just like how many hosts I can get or like, just making things fancy. It's about impact. This is why this podcast exists because we try to make an impact. If we can do it, happily so. And this is where I need the help from my audience. So if you just discovered this podcast by luck, you're just scrolling and you just saw the CTO show and you stopped, give me a favor. Share it with your friends and colleagues and follow us because this is how we can reach more people. Like we as Bill mentioned, we need more people, we need awareness. And this is what I'm trying to do. So if you can help me, I really appreciate it. Also, I would love to thank all my followers, my audience who keep coming again and again. Today, at the day we're recording this episode, I met someone in an event and they were telling me, like, by the way, we get a lot of insights from what you're doing. This make me happy because that means I'm able to contribute even on a small scale. So if you're doing so, keep spreading the word. Keep telling people about the podcast. I really appreciate it. I can see the results. We are trending on the Apple podcast charts. Of course, we keep changing countries, but since 2025 till date, every week we are top 10 or top 20, sometimes top 30 in a country and sometimes in multiple countries at the same time. So this cannot happen if you are not coming and listening to us. So thank you very much. And as I promise always, stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.